In 1943, the Nazis opened a concentration camp for pregnant women in Dietrich. They performed pseudo-medical experiments on prisoners from occupied Eastern Europe. The exact number of victims of the concentration camp, which had no analogues, is still unknown. Initially, there was a World War II labor camp for workers who were supposed to build a motorway for the Third Reich on the Vienna-Wroclaw route. The highway was supposed to run under the forest, but its construction never began. After the division of the Sudetenland into 3 districts, there was a need to solve the problem with women from among those abducted for forced labor who were pregnant. These were prisoners from Eastern European countries, and instead of a work camp, a so-called maternity concentration camp was founded here for these workers. Women who got pregnant on the farms of local farmers from all over the district got here, where they were assigned to agricultural work. Before you continue watching, please subscribe to my channel and like it. Of course, this is not necessary, the main thing is to be sincere. According to historians, 636 children were born in a local concentration camp, 206 of them disappeared without a trace. 18 women also died here. All these figures were given in the official list, but according to unofficial sources, the number of victims and disappeared without a trace could well reach 2,000. During the Second World War, the Nazis stole thousands of young women from the occupied or controlled territories for forced labor. In many cases, they were assigned to German farmers and entrepreneurs. Czech historian Itka Gruntova, who studied the history of the concentration camp in Dietrich, wrote in her article, "Young women, workers from Eastern European countries from among the women in labor were taken to the maternity camp. Unlike other camps of that time, there were no watchtowers, but the purpose of the camp was the same. The definition of maternity was just a distraction, it was an integral part of the Nazi extermination machine." This is confirmed by František Nedbelek in his book Places of Suffering and Disobedience. Dietrichowitsky camp was the only camp of its kind designed to eliminate people. As can be seen from the memoirs of Maria Komischak, a former prisoner of this concentration camp, doctors did not care at all about the condition of patients and children. And in a separate room, experiments were carried out that led to infertility. For such experiments, the camp chose young women who were not pregnant and gave them various drugs. As part of the experiment, German army soldiers were brought to them, who came there in cars and subjected the prisoners to sexual violence. Women returned from such experiments in a completely deplorable state. Some died as a result of experiments or became seriously ill. But even during this dramatic period, there were cases of selfless help from the local population. Some of the residents of Dietrich were horrified when they realized what was happening next door to their house. Having entered the service in the concentration camp, they sympathized with the prisoners and sought to help them. According to the historian Joseph Bogatets, local residents were employed as guards in the concentration camp. One of these guards, Ferdinand Weigel, worked as a cook in Dietrich and sought to secretly put more food on the prisoner's plate. And the supervisor Karel Bar allowed women, when no one was looking, to secretly go to the basement for potatoes and cabbage. There's also a case when a childless married couple was able to pull a prisoner with a child out of a concentration camp. They employed her in their horticultural farm, and thereby saved 2 lives. The previously mentioned survivor of the concentration camp, Maria Komischak, recalled after the war how the Nazis stole her from Ukraine together with her husband for forced labor. "When I got pregnant and couldn't work anymore, I wrote a letter to my mother complaining about the hard life on German territory. The letter was intercepted and soon I was interrogated by the German police. Together with a column of women, children and several men whom the Nazis brought from the occupied territory of the Soviet Union, I got to the city of Moravska Treshebova on December 22, 1943. From there we had to walk with small children, in a heavy snowstorm, to the Dietrich concentration camp. We were beaten and starved in the camp." Maria recalls that young women of Polish, Ukrainian, Russian and Belarusian nationalities predominated in the concentration camp. The camp was guarded by SS men. Some foreigners also served in the security department, apparently Volksdeutsch, that is, people with German roots living outside the national state. Women gave birth in the most difficult conditions and had to help one another, and after giving birth they were forced to do various kinds of work. There were 3-tier beds in the rooms. The sanitary conditions were terrible: dirt, stench, and to everything else cold and hunger. With the end of the war approaching, conditions in the camp, from where Franz Steiner and Wilhelm Schmidt, who were known throughout the world for their cruelty, were recalled, somewhat softened. Oskar Ferenkel, whom the end of the war found in Drschikov, was appointed the new chief. In April 1945, 31 children were born in this concentration camp, and the last baby was born within these walls on May 8. He was a healthy boy, about whose further fate no information has been preserved. Historians are still trying to find at least some information about him. Drschikov was released only on May 9, 1945 at about 8 o'clock in the morning. It is difficult to find detailed information about the fate of the prisoners of this concentration camp. After the war, many did not want to remember the past. The ethnic composition of the local population has also changed dramatically. Sudeten Germans were evicted from Czechoslovakia, and almost no one from the original inhabitants remained here. The investigation of the history of the so-called maternity camp began only in 1954. Some researchers believe that the real death toll here may be approaching 800. Others suggest that the number of victims could exceed 1,000. After the end of the Second World War, local authorities, including the village headman, claimed that he only knew that the local camp was intended exclusively for the residence of workers. Local authorities sought to cover up the traces of crimes occurring in this territory. Only later, employees who came to work in the district administration began to document what was really happening here, and erected a small monument in memory of the victims of the Drschikov concentration camp. Thanks for watching, friends. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and like it. See you soon.